Guess who said that? Hi everyone, welcome to Kok Talks. This time I want to talk about the generation gap and how a lot of people got it wrong. The generation gap is a very interesting topic. Everyone seems to think that the previous generation got it harder, making them tougher than the later generations. I got the idea of talking about this topic because of all the random generation gap articles lying around everywhere in the internet. Seriously, the generation gap has created a large industry. Not only are there articles flying about on the internet about generation gap, but there are a lot of trainers and companies who have events to teach you how to handle generation gap. And I personally believe more than half of them don't know what they're talking about. So to help you save money, today I'm going to share with you my thoughts on the generation gap. Number one, generation gaps are not new. Remember the quote that we talked about earlier? Did you guess who was it? That's right, it was Socrates who said that 2,500 years ago. So do you get it right? If you didn't, well, click subscribe below. That is your punishment. So again, generation gaps are not new. It is just that back then Socrates complained about kids not rising up and calling the elders, but nowadays we just talk about how kids always play iPad and generally wants everything fast and are being entitled. Actually, nothing changed. The only thing that changed is the world, and after the world changed, the way these generation gaps come out or manifest itself is different depending on the generation you're in. Nowadays we tend to talk crap about Generation Z, Zoomers or Millennials, and you know what? Actually, a lot of people do not know how to define this group of people. All you need to do is have different ideas, and if you're younger, boom, you get a label. I still remember back then when I was younger, I was labeled a Generation Y. And if you're old enough, you would know what they say about Generation Y. If you're not, very simple, just make a simple Google search. You will find all the information you need about what they say about us. But then the next generation came along and all the attention given to Generation Y was pushed into them. Suddenly we are not exciting anymore. But then it was the same labels and same stigma that was passed down. And you know what? The same labels and stigma were actually used on Generation X before Generation Y. So why was that? I think it's just because people are generally lazy and they tend to recycle old ideas. So if the era or the environment is different, then why are the labels that are passed down the same? Actually, to me, I think it is because of the fundamental attribution bias. Basically, what the fundamental attribution bias is that, if I think of my own personal successes, I would say that it is because of my own hard work. While if I have to look at my failures, I would say that it is because of the environment. When I talk about other people, it will be different. When I see other people's success, I would say it's because, that guy's successful because of his environment, he was brought up in a certain way. And if I see their failures, it is their personal trait, something internal to them that caused them to fail. Also, we tend to cut ourselves off or remove ourselves from people we generally don't identify with, creating an in-group or my group of people versus your group of people. What this means is that you create a situation where my generation, we face this set of problems and we had it harder, while your generation are a bit more soft and not so tough. Okay, couple these two together and I believe I have a simple hypothesis on this generation gap. Based on this, it makes me think that the generic view of the generation gap is wrong. The current generic view views the generation gap happening because of the different environment or era they live in. So the greatest generation lived during the World War II, they are tough, they went through war, there are emergencies that happened. And then the next is the baby boomers, they brought up the economy, they worked hard and made their money. And Generation X, they leached off the baby boomers and kept the growth going. And Generation Y was born with the technologies and learned how to use technology quickly. But if this was the case, where because of different environment happening and creating different people, then how come the generation stigmas are still the same? A better explanation than era or environment would be different people are just in different stage of life at different ages. Let me introduce you to the very famous Erikson stage of development. According to this very famous human development model, it states that different people tend to focus on different things at different stage of life, which is usually correlated with their age. I believe this makes more sense. For example, you can see older people spending more time with their family and emphasizing how important family is compared to younger people who look for more good times with friends and telling you friendship is important. That's why we get old people keep sending us good morning messages in nice little pictures, because they tend to value that relationship with us, while young people just generally find it corny. So the mindset in each stage is the same. It's just that time moved on and the environment changed. So the way it is expressed is different. For example, old people keep saying that young people keep looking down at their phones and playing with their phones. But remember, back then, the old people were also looking down at their books and newspapers. Talking about workplaces, nowadays we keep saying that young people want your fun workplace with foosball tables and gaming consoles. But remember, back then we also wanted to have fun bosses and beautiful offices. So in the end, it is not about a change to mindset. It is the same mindset, just the environment is different. It's basically the same game, just that the pieces you move are different. So why am I so interested into this topic? Well, back then I was labeled as a Generation Y myself. And I read online and in newspapers and in articles that how my generation was the worst of the worst, until the next generation came out and they got the short end of the stick and they took on and inherited the labels. I believe this is a bit unfair. I've seen how a lot of work managers, supervisors has been saying that, oh my god, the new generation is so hard to teach and they are so squishy, not tough enough. But then these are actually an excuse to hide their inability to manage young people. Secondly, it is because
the greatest divisions this nation has ever seen were the conflicts of
boomers and zoomers. This type of discrimination and stereotype are actually very dangerous. When you say a generation is lazy or entitled, we try to treat them badly because they deserve it. Okay, this type of mindset has actually infiltrated into our universities and brainwashed into our students. Articles, reports, expert opinions tend to say that fresh graduates are lazy, entitled, and demanding of high salaries. But in reality, that is actually a bit different. In interviews that I've sit through, I've seen fresh graduates coming up and saying that, hey, I'm just a fresh graduate, you can offer me anything. I know that I don't have the experience, so any offer you make, I'll happily take. And companies offer 1,000 to 1,008 in Kuala Lumpur to work. These fresh graduates, many of them from rural areas or poorer families, get their self-worth and self-esteem battered because the older generation did not take the time to think about the challenges they go through and just slap a stereotype on them. Okay, and these are the fresh graduates who has the energy to work late nights and long hours for you. Just because the old generation are unable or even unwilling to pay a fair wage to the fresh graduates, a lot of them gang up and gaslight the younger generation, the fresh graduates. And then they have the audacity to come out and say the youth is our future and human capital is our most important asset. A third reason is that my generation are going to be or even are now decision makers. Business owners, directors, managers, head of departments, whatsoever. I just like to caution everyone and remind everyone that we had a label when we were younger too. And what has helped us reach this stage? So we're just trying to help the next generation. Does this sound noble? I don't think so. It's just fair for us to help the next generation achieve what they need to be so that we can generally avoid being assholes. So what can we do about generation gaps, especially at the workplace? I don't have a straight answer for you, but there are certain guidelines that I like to share. Number one, don't patronize any generation, be it the older or the younger generation. Try to engage them at their own level. Don't tell them, okay, I know what you need and here is what I give to you. Communicate with them, okay, let them understand that we are open to them. They are the ones in charge of their own life. All we can do is just to give some advice or actually help fulfill certain needs if we can, and hope for the best. Secondly, remember that different people are at different stage of life, and thus they may have different problems or focus at different things. Just treat everyone as equals and just communicate and engage. Finally, and most importantly, don't perpetuate the stereotype. This may be the biggest help that we can give to different generations. While I understand that reports or articles about generation gaps can be useful in giving you a first starting point in understanding the problems, they are not the gospel truth. Taking the time to understand and communicate with your team will be more useful than that. Alright, that's it for Kok Talks this time around. That's all I have to say for this topic for now. If you have any ideas or comments, please use the comment section below and share with us what you think. And most importantly, before we end, please subscribe to Kok Talks. Unless we have a generation gap.